And good afternoon to you from the KXAN Live studios. I'm Billy Gates, and this is the Horns Report. And here with me to talk about UT men's and women's basketball is none other than KXAN Sports Director Roger Wallace. Roger, let's get right into it. Huge week for the women's team. They pick up 2 wins over top 13 teams. Baylor was number 13, Kansas State number 2. Most recently, they had that Kansas State win here at Moody Center. Roger, you're on the radio broadcast for those games. I mean, just kind of from your vantage point, how big was this Kansas State win?
Well, it was huge because it keeps them in the race. They're only 2 out in the loss column now, with K-State's loss, and OU actually is the only 1-loss team left. But the Baylor game, obvious reasons, Billy, because they were ranked, again, trying to keep in the race. But, you check off another box. Last scheduled trip to Waco. They're right now going to be 1-0 in Foster's Pavilion against Baylor, and Baylor's going to be 0-1 against Texas, and that will irritate them. But yeah, we're kind of past the Rory Harmon thing. This is their team. They played an entire Big 12 schedule plus 1 non-conference game, and the player you're looking at right there, Madison Booker, she is something that I've never seen come into this program as a freshman with her skill set. So the pieces around her, can she withstand, another half of a Big 12 season and postseason, as many minutes as she has to play? But as I think Vic Schaefer said it on Sunday, what the last 2 games have shown them is they are good enough. Question is, what's the ceiling with this team? They had that K-State game. They were up 6 in Manhattan, and things got away from them at the end of the third quarter. They ended up losing in a one-possession game, or they could be sitting in a much different spot. But this is a really talented team minus Rory Harmon.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the thing that's raised eyebrows for most people is how they've responded after losing that, first-team All-American point guard. I mean, that's what Rory Harmon is. Like, she's one of the best players in the country when she's able to get on the floor. So it's just been pretty remarkable what they've been able to do. Now, this trip against Kansas State, this game against Kansas State, I should say, this last one, Kansas State didn't have Ayoka Lee, their big 6'6", kind of paint controller, offensive and defensive powerhouse for the Wildcats. However, I mean, Kansas State's still pretty good team without her, but Texas played just tremendous defense, especially along the perimeter. I thought they ran Kansas State off the 3-point line really, really well.
Yeah, and Vic Schaefer talked about it. When Lee's in there, it's a much different offense. They can't really spread it out because they have to go through her. And while she is an incredible scorer, she's an incredible scorer from 2 to 7 feet. So she's always clogging things up. So now they didn't play well offensively, so it's hard to say offensively they're anywhere near what they were with Ayoka Lee. But to me, it's a little bit like Billy with no Rory Harmon. But what we've seen is the emergence of Madison Booker with the ball in her hands. And I think I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens when Rory Harmon comes back next year, because Madison Booker will have played a grinding schedule as the point guard with the ball in her hands so much. That's going to be an interesting adjustment to see how Vic Schaefer works, because she is so unusual as a point guard because of her size, and she has all that skill to go with the size, and she can create her shot. So what we've seen with the loss of Rory Harmon is maybe a different element to Madison Booker's game.
Yeah, I mean, she's like a true point forward, kind of what, I hate to make this comparison, but I mean, kind of what Magic Johnson was when he came into the NBA.
Yep.
I mean, it's sort of like that point guard, a player with forward size and strength, right, but with point guard handles, court awareness, and that sort of thing. So,
and if we're going to go down that road, Magic didn't really create like Madison
right.
Booker can create her shot. Now
right.
we've kind of gone a little deep into a rabbit hole comparing one of the greatest of all time to a player with, 24 games under her belt in college. But the point is, this has brought out maybe even more of a skill set we knew she had, but now we're seeing it on a nightly basis with her ability to run the offense and go get a shot when she needed. Didn't play well in the first half, and then she just took over the game in the second half.
Yeah, second half, scored 13 of her 20. She led all scorers with 20 points against the Wildcats. 7 of 18 shooting. Obviously, you don't want to see 18 shots, 20 points. You kind of want to be a little more efficient than that. But her second half, I believe she was 5 of 10 from the field. So nice 50% shooting half for her. Taylor Jones, 13 points, 8 rebounds. Aaliyah Moore had 10 rebounds at halftime.
Yeah.
On her way to 15 boards and 10 points. She had a couple free throws kind of late in the game to get her to a double-double. That was another thing I thought with Kansas State missing Lee. That opened up the paint for Taylor and Aaliyah to really, really work on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, and Aaliyah Moore is an interesting player because she's not that big. She's about the same height as Madison Booker, 6'1", maybe 6'2", but she's great around the basket. She's got great moves. She can make herself small, if you will. She can split double teams. They all can play with both hands, so that's what makes her so good. And then the other thing, Billy, is when they get Deonna Gaston going, then all of a sudden you've got another big problem for teams because she is so athletic and she's so bouncy.
Yeah.
Aaliyah Moore's not bouncy. She's strong. She's crafty. Deonna Gaston is bouncy, so that's another element to add. Now, this team has had trouble at times offensively and with turnovers. This is not a flawless team by any means because of what they did over the last 2 games. But the pieces are there, as Vic Schaefer said. And then if they can get Shaylee Gonzalez going a little bit with her shooting, she struggled, 1 of 7 yesterday. So, it's going to be interesting down the stretch. They're the highest-ranked team in the Big 12 right now, even though they're not on top of the standings and sitting at 7th in the nation. You have to figure, as long as they don't falter, great chance to get that first and second round at Moody for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, you said it. Texas moves up to number 7 in the AP poll released earlier today. They move up from 12, and then Kansas State dropped from 2 to 8. So they just kind of sort of flip-flop little positioning there. And
yeah, I had a little problem with K-State going up to 2. It was almost like they just kept going up, but they kept winning. But you knew that they're not the same thing, same team without Aoka Lee. So, I think Vic Schaefer said they played better at Baylor, and I think I would add the Baylor game was maybe a more impressive win on Thursday to do that on the road against a team that already had beaten them at home. And K-State, I expected them to win on Sunday. Didn't expect the way things kind of ended where K-State had a chance to cut it down to a 4-point game late.
They went on a 10-0 run, made a blowout look close. I mean, that was and after the game, Schaefer very kind of matter-of-factly said, we didn't finish the way we wanted to. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Kind of an understatement.
And he pulls his hair out with some of the turnovers. And that's the
absolutely.
thing. They can't afford in close games. And if you watch them, Billy, it's fascinating sometimes. They create a turnover, and then they get in a little bit too much of a hurry to turn that into points, and they might give it right back. And all of a sudden, it goes from a turnover to an and-one opportunity for the other team. So that's one of the things I think he would say they need to clean up.
Yeah, and they do need to heal up from their bumps and bruises. They're pretty banged up. Gaston, Moore, Booker, they're all kind of got lingering injuries. Gaston's the worst out of all 3 of them. She's still got that ankle issue that she's been playing through. Played 23 minutes against Kansas State, so that was nice to see. And they've got 6 days before they got to play again. They're going to go up to TCU on Saturday and take on the Horned Frogs. And so we'll see if they're able to get healed up.
Yeah, and I want to mention a couple other things. Shaylee Gonzalez, she struggles. She's having played a lot of minutes, and so you don't know how that wear and tear. And then someone like Shay Holly, who when she doesn't score, you assume, she may have struggled, but she is so valuable in so many ways. And then the X factor we've seen the last couple of games, Billy, is Jacqueline Winnetanda, the sophomore from South Dakota, so long and so athletic. When she can get it going, she's a problem just because, and I was joking with another broadcaster about, can you imagine how many kids like that in South Dakota that had to face her?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, she's about 6'2". Yeah. She's all arms and legs. She's skilled with her left, and her presence has become felt more the last couple of ball games. So
and she's like she's a pretty true inside and outside player. Like, she provided a really nice spark off the bench there in the first half. Came in, got a tough bucket inside, stepped out, hit a 3-pointer from the wing there in that first half to build Texas' lead to, I think, 12 or 14 there early on. And you're right. I mean, if she's able to kind of get consistent with her play, and as Schaefer starts to kind of ramp up her minutes. I mean, she's another kind of like sixth man sort of off the bench.
Yeah, and you like to see Amina Muhammad get going a little bit. Seems like she's maybe taking a little bit of a step back.
Yeah.
She's so athletic and she's so good going to the basket and creating some havoc. But again, seems like turnover bug has hit her a little bit. So we've talked about just about every piece, and there are a lot of really good ones, minus Rory Harmon, to make you believe that this team can still make a run.
Yeah, so they're back in action Saturday up in TCU, Fort Worth. So
think there'll be some T-shirts left over from this past Saturday?
Maybe. Who knows? All right,
That's our segue.
Moving over to the men's side. This is footage against Houston, I believe is what I grabbed. Yeah, there we go. There's Houston. Tough overtime loss at home against the Cougars here. But a nice win on the road against TCU. This men's team, they're a bit up and down.
Yeah, and welcome to the Big 12, right? The standings are just absurd.
Oh, yeah.
With 12 teams within 2 losses, and I always look at the loss column because you can get more wins, you can't undo losses. So to me, the loss column is the big one, and they're sitting there still with 5, but they're only 2 games back in the loss column. But yeah, I think that win at TCU was so impressive because the Houston game, the crowd, the energy, the fact that they had it after falling behind by 12 and then kind of taking control, and then they lose it in overtime, and Houston did what Houston does, and that's second chance points and maybe just a little bit too tough, and then they probably felt what they gave on Saturday at KU. Because they got blitzed pretty early by the Jayhawks. So that's kind of this league, you get an emotional win and you don't have time to catch your breath. And that's why I think what Texas did at TCU was so impressive. The fact that they had some extra time helped. But TCU's coming off a big win over Texas Tech at home.
Yeah.
And then they fall behind by 10 early. And then, as Rodney Terry said today, max time down the stretch. This kid is unbelievable.
I mean... That was where I was going next. Max Abmas scored the final 13 points for the Longhorns to really propel them to that win. The game was tied with about 3-ish left.
Yeah.
And then
He made the strip. He made that strip.
Yeah, Abmas made a great defensive play underneath.
Yeah, and he finished with an and one at the other end.
Just absolutely put the team on his back. Went on an 11-0 run by himself. He scored all 11 points. That 3-point play came down, knocked down 2 straight threes on consecutive possessions, and then had another couple free throws to toss in there. But that was sort of like the same game track Booker took against Kansas State. Not a good first half. I think Abmas only took like 4 or 5 shots there in the first half of that TCU game, and then he just showed why he's one of the most prolific scorers in not just Texas history, in NCAA Division I history.
Yeah.
He passed Danny Manning for number 13 on the all-time scoring list during the TCU game. I mean, there's not a shot that he can't hit.
No, and it's remarkable with his size, the fact that he can create shots. And I think of the 3 right in front of the Texas bench to put him up by 6. They had 2 defenders draped on him, including Micah Peavy, who Ronnie Terry talked about, put him on him, their best defender. Micah Peavy, by the way, his dad, David, legendary Texas high school coach, used to be at Aikens High School at Duncanville, but Micah Peavy transferred from Texas Tech, and Abmas found a way. And then the logo 3 was almost, too much. It's like, come on. You're hitting it from the TCU logo there to put it up 9 and really put it out of reach. But yeah, pretty rarefied air when you're passing Danny Manning and you're creeping on Oscar Robertson, granted an extra year for Abmas. But he's doing at Texas what he did at Oral Roberts, and that's what I think is surprising people, is he's scoring at about the same clip, somewhere between 18 and 20 points per game, a little higher at ORU, but he's doing it against obviously much better night in and night out competition.
Right, it's not the Summit League anymore.
No.
It's the real deal. It's the Big 12 now. With the AP rankings that came out this morning, Texas still on the outside looking in, which I kind of expected that. They've got to win a few more games in order.
No doubt, 15-7.
In order to get up in the top 25. But like you said earlier, 4-5 in conference play. Houston and Kansas lead the conference at 6-3, and then Texas is tied with 4 other teams. They're at 4-5. tied for 8th.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's. I mean,
there's 12 teams.
Yeah.
The only teams behind them are Central Florida and West Virginia.
Yeah. This mess is just. I mean, it's almost like when we talked about District 25 in football season.
Yeah.
How there were 4 different teams that could make the playoffs, and there were only 2 different spots. Like this is going to make for tournament seeding just bedlam.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I take it back too. Central Florida's sitting there at 4 and 5,
Yeah.
tied with Texas. But yeah, it's crazy to think of how good of teams are going to be playing on that first night. And with the 14 teams, Billy, I've never been a big fan of conference tournaments, and we've talked about it. 4 or 5 days determining what you would think fairly 2 months determines. But can you imagine going to Kansas City and have to play 5 games in 5 days? That seems absurd, comes to mind when you think about, I mean, it's not football, but still, players' safety, well-being. Think of a guy like Tyrese Hunter and what a game takes out of him, and they've had a lot of problems with cramping with a guy like Tyrese Hunter.
Yeah.
How's he do that for 5 days? You can't. That's physically inappropriate.
Right.
But, it's a big moneymaker, so,
Yeah.
they're going to do it. But, they got second half coming up starting tomorrow against Iowa State. That was, about a 100th of a second away from stealing one in Waco on Saturday night.
Yeah. And you talk about the conference tournament, they're including all 14 teams, and so this is an extra day than it usually is. And yeah, like if you're playing all those games, and then maybe you get into this tournament, you get into the NCAA tournament, and you get put in like a first 4 situation.
Exactly.
Then
that's irresponsible.
Yeah. then you're playing like an entire week.
And you're gonna have the 10th team in the Big 12 play on that Tuesday.
Yeah.
Well, just look at the standings now, and the 10th team might be a team that's going to get into the tournament. So, to your point, you win a couple, and you're going, is it worth it? Do we think we can really win 5?
Yeah.
Or do we just, pack it up and go home and wait? I don't know. It seems a bit much to me.
Yeah. No, me too. And I'm pretty sure it means that much for a lot of other folks too. Texas is at home tomorrow. It'll be their 6th and final consecutive conference ranked opponent in Iowa State. They moved down to 14, I believe.
Yep.
And so, I mean, it's another day in the Big 12 playing a nationally ranked opponent.
Yeah, their longtime sports information director Scott McConnell said today on their Zoom media availability, it's the first time in the history of the poll, which started in 1949, that Texas will play 6 consecutive ranked opponents when they host Iowa State, and then Saturday West Virginia comes in, and you hate to put must game wins. But that would fall into a bad loss if they not only lose at home, but then they get swept by a team in the bottom part of the standing. So if they can find a way to beat Iowa State, maybe get on a little streak here. If you can get 3 in a row in the Big 12, you're doing something.
Yeah,
and Iowa State hasn't won on the road in the conference. Nearly won, as we mentioned on Saturday. They won big games at home against Kansas and Houston, but Hilton Magic doesn't travel. So we'll see if they can figure it out at home. Texas has been kind of that Jekyll and Hyde team at home and away.
Yeah, and we talk about this grind and stuff, and winning 3 in a row in the Big 12 is so big, and yet they still want teams to play 5 games in the conference tournament. Oh well, I guess cross that bridge.
No doubt.
When we get there.
And you ask any team, and they say, sign us up. I get it.
They want to go out and just roll the ball out and play 40 minutes of basketball. That's all they want to do.
Like summer AAU tournaments, and they play 2 games in a day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, hey, that'll do it for this episode of the Horns Report. Thank you so much for joining us. For Roger Wallace, I'm Billy Gates. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you again soon.